What if the U.S. annexed Mexico after the Mexican-American War? 1848. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ends the Mexican-American War. In our timeline, the United States takes nearly half of Mexico's territory: California, Texas, the Southwest. But what if it didn't stop there? What if, under pressure from expansionists and Southern slaveholders, President James K. Polk ordered the full annexation of Mexico itself? No treaty, no borders, just total absorption. The stars and stripes raised over the Palacio Nacional. The Mexican Congress dissolved. The people, stunned, furious, and fractured, suddenly found themselves part of a nation that never asked if they wanted in. America had fulfilled its manifest destiny, not just from sea to shining sea, but from Oregon to Oaxaca. And the world watched as the line between conqueror and republic blurred into something far more dangerous. The annexation doesn't feel like expansion. It feels like conquest. American troops remain in every major Mexican city. English becomes the enforced language of government. The peso is replaced with the US dollar. Laws are rewritten. Schools are stripped of Mexican history. To Washington, this is a bold new experiment, integrating 8 million Mexican citizens into the republic. To Mexicans, it's something else entirely: colonialism draped in red, white, and blue. The dream of manifest destiny has been realized, but it's not a dream shared by those now living under it. The American South sees opportunity in Mexico's vast lands. Plantation owners flood into the annexed territories, bringing enslaved people with them. But Mexico abolished slavery decades earlier. Tensions erupt. Mexican peasants and black slaves revolt together in pockets of resistance. U.S. lawmakers face a legal nightmare. Does the Constitution's protection of slavery extend to former Mexican soil? In this timeline, the slave question isn't delayed, it detonates early, and the American Civil War starts smoldering years before Fort Sumter. By 1854, the Mexican resistance has a name: La Segunda Independencia. It is not a protest, it is guerrilla war. Fighters ambush U.S. patrols. Cities erupt in riots. American officials are assassinated. Washington labels them terrorists. But to the locals, they are patriots. Catholic priests hide rebels in churches. Ranchers fund militias. And a young general named Benito Juarez begins to rise, not as a Mexican president, but as a revolutionary against U.S. occupation. America is bigger than ever, but it's bleeding in every province it claims. The annexation becomes the defining political issue of the 1856 presidential election. Northern abolitionists oppose it fiercely, citing imperialism and the spread of slavery. Southerners defend it as divine will. Washington is paralyzed. In Congress, senators brawl. In newspapers, accusations of tyranny fly. Some call for Mexico to become a separate protectorate. Others demand full statehood. But no one can answer the central question: how do you govern a people who never agreed to be governed? Ironically, Texas, once the frontier, is now the buffer. Former Tejanos, caught between their Mexican heritage and their American citizenship, are treated with suspicion from both sides. Vigilante violence increases. Mexican rebels launch attacks into Texas towns, hoping to spark uprisings. Texan militias respond with brutal force. Border towns become battlegrounds, and the legacy of annexation begins to poison the very state that sparked the war to begin with. In 1860, under mounting pressure, the U.S. allows a symbolic national referendum across former Mexican territory. The question: should Mexico remain part of the Union? 85% vote no. Washington invalidates the result. There is no Mexico, the Secretary of State says. There is only America. The backlash is swift. Railroad lines are sabotaged. Military outposts are bombed. It becomes clear: America has annexed land, not loyalty. When the American Civil War erupts in 1861, it doesn't stay north of the Rio Grande. Confederate agents arm Mexican rebels hoping to distract the Union. Some Mexican provinces align with the South, not out of sympathy, but out of defiance. Others support the Union for a chance at citizenship. The war becomes a triangle: North versus South versus occupied. In this version of history, the Civil War is not just about slavery, it's about sovereignty, and Mexico, unwillingly, becomes the stage for its bloodiest acts. President Lincoln supports the original annexation. But once in office, he realizes the moral rot beneath it. He proposes gradual autonomy for Mexico, perhaps even a Commonwealth system. But Congress revolts. Southern senators call it betrayal. Radical Republicans say it's not enough. Lincoln is boxed in. Enforce imperial control or risk political collapse. His Emancipation Proclamation is delayed, altered, and challenged, because the South argues that if Mexico's freedom can be denied, so can the enslaved. Lincoln's war just got even harder. By 1865, the war ends, but not the contradictions. The U.S. keeps Mexico, but divides it. A new set of laws emerge: English-only schooling, segregated institutions, restricted voting rights for Southern Mexicans. It's not slavery, but it isn't freedom. Wealthy American settlers control businesses. The Catholic Church is surveilled. This isn't assimilation, it's a caste system. And while the Union claims victory over the Confederacy, it quietly builds a new kind of subjugation below the Rio Grande. In 1870, a new movement rises, not with rifles, but with books. Teachers begin printing underground Spanish-language textbooks. Students recite banned poetry. Priests preach in coded sermons. A generational revolt begins in the classroom. "Your language is your country," one teacher scrawls on a chalkboard before being arrested. Mexico, under occupation, becomes a cultural insurgency. Washington thought it had conquered land. It didn't realize it had awakened memory. In 1873, a prominent U.S. governor in Mexico is assassinated by a young university student during a public speech. The student, shot on the spot, becomes a martyr overnight. His name, Cesar Herrera, becomes graffiti on every church wall, market stall, and train car. In Washington, the incident is called an act of treason. In Mexico, it's called the beginning of freedom. Riots explode in Puebla and Mérida. American soldiers are pulled out of cities. The message is clear. Even decades after annexation, Mexico has not surrendered. By 1880, the U.S. has divided Mexico into 5 new territorial departments. None have full statehood. Their governors are appointed from Washington. Congress blocks every petition for representation. Meanwhile, white settlers from the North flood in, buying land for pennies. Indigenous groups are displaced yet again, this time by a different flag. And in every town hall, the Pledge of Allegiance is recited with clenched jaws and silent stares. On paper, it's America. In reality, it's something else entirely, an empire wearing a republic's face. The annexation sends a warning across the hemisphere. In this timeline, Cuba and Puerto Rico militarize. Brazil strengthens its monarchy. Chile and Argentina accelerate border fortifications. The U.S. is no longer just a neighbor, it is a threat. Anti-American sentiment becomes political currency. Latin American leaders begin to view their own indigenous and mestizo populations not as burdens, but as potential allies against northern expansionism. The region doesn't become the backyard of U.S. power. It becomes its ideological mirror and its challenger. By the turn of the century, the U.S. is deeply divided. Racial unrest simmers in the South. Labor riots shake industrial cities. But in annexed Mexico, the tension is something older and harder. A centuries-old identity that refuses to be erased. Washington pushes for full integration by 1900. Instead, it gets another wave of coordinated uprisings. Bilingual newspapers call for independence. Former Union generals warn that the Republic has consumed more than it can digest, and average Americans begin to ask, was it worth it? In this alternate present, the U.S. stretches from Canada to Chiapas. It is vast, powerful, and permanently fractured. The legacy of annexation lives in street names, in flags flown in protest, in classrooms where Spanish is still spoken despite curriculum bans. America won the war. It redrew the map, but it never won the people. And the greatest question in this version of history isn't how the US conquered Mexico. It's how Mexico changed the United States. Because sometimes the deeper occupation is cultural. And sometimes the cost of empire isn't paid in battles, but in belonging. Like and subscribe for more from History Twist. Leave a comment below to request your own what-if video. See you soon for the next video.